Operation Encore is a 501c nonprofit that is helping veterans turn into rock stars every single day. You can learn more about what Operation Encore is doing by going over to their website at www.operationencore.org. That is www.operationencore.org. If you can give them a hand, just click that little donate button or follow all of their social medias and learn exactly what they are doing to change the lives of our veterans every single day. Hey, welcome everybody to Drunk Dudes in a Gun Room. Today's episode, I am personally excited for. There's been a few episodes out there that, I was looking forward to, but this one, I have been looking forward to doing this interview. So let me introduce to you David O. Chung. He is an author. He has his memoirs, Face of the Enemy, An American Asian's War in Vietnam and at Home, about his life story as a Vietnam veteran and veteran activist. Let's bring on Doc Chung.
How you doing?
Hey, good, man. I have been looking forward to this. You do not know how long I have been trying to get a Vietnam veteran to come on the show. So I want you to know I apologize if it gets a little bit long, but I am excited and I have got a ton of questions. So,
well, just take your time, relax. Let's get this going.
All right. So let's start out with what brought you to the military? Where did you grow up, and did you enter or were you drafted?
Well, I was drafted out of college because back in the 60s, they had the draft lottery. They decided to change some of the policies with the draft lottery. And if your number was called, that means there were no more exemptions, whether you were married, had children, or you were in college. It all depended also on the kind of work you did. If you had a important job enough in the government, then you were exempted. My grades weren't too good in college, and my draft lottery number came up number 4.
Oh, wow.
So, but instead of taking a 2-year draft in the Army, I decided to go into the Air Force.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think that was a bad choice. I really don't. At least you get options at that point.
The Air Force, I thought it was a good choice until I realized that I was going to end up going to Vietnam. And when I got to Vietnam, my little detachment was assigned to the 1st Marine Air Wing, 12th Marine Air Group.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that didn't work out so well, did it?
No. You know what? I was I wasn't a combat specialist or whatever. I was just always at the wrong place at the wrong time. I was just a transportation specialist.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing big, nothing secretive or anything.
Right.
But we were there in Vietnam during the Easter Offensive of 1972. So it taught me a lot about life, dealing with, what it was like to be in a place where now you look like the majority of the people who are around you.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was something I've been doing a lot of thinking about. And I will definitely be buying your book because I didn't realize, this whole time I've been trying to get a Vietnam veteran on to talk about the training differences, the different tactics and stuff that happened between my war and their war. And until I met you, I never even thought about how somebody that was Asian descent, doesn't even have to be Vietnamese, gets drafted, born in the States, lived in the States, full-blooded American, and gets drafted, and how much controversy that could probably have created. How was it for you when you got over there? Were you like welcomed by people, or were people kind of?
It was a mixed bag.
Yeah.
Most of the guys that I was based with in Vietnam, I started off in Saigon at Tan Son Nhut Air Base,
Mm-hmm.
And then ended up being transferred to Ben Hoa. And from Ben Hoa, we were going back and forth to An Loc, Ben Hoa, and Tan Son Nhut on convoys. The Vietnamese people You have to understand, when I got to the war in 1972, everybody knew that Nixon was trying to pull people out.
Mm-hmm.
Kissinger was in Paris trying to negotiate a pullout, peace with honor, through President Nixon's Vietnamization. So the Vietnamese people, they weren't dumb. They knew what was going on. A lot of Vietnamese people would come up to me and they would touch my skin and say, hey, you same me, but you get to go home and you start this war and now you're leaving us behind. A lot of the GIs that I were stationed with, no one wanted to be the last guy to die in Vietnam as the peace accords were being mulled over in Paris.
Right.
But, there was some racism, but it was a different type of racism that I experienced when I was a civilian in the States. This was a racism of bantering back and forth between the GIs because we had to take care of each other. If people knew the things that we said to each other in today's world, they would totally think that we're woke.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we were all brothers back then.
Yeah, and I think that still exists in today's military. Things that I seen between soldiers, things that were said between soldiers. Even the real fights and the bickering because you're living so close to each other, and just somebody's having a bad day, they get some bad news at home, and next thing you know, there's little spats and fights, and words are being said, and usually by the time it's over with, by the next day, you're back to being buddies and back to playing chess with each other or basketball or something,
Oh, yeah. We had Bill Byrd. He was a white kid from Alabama, and Sergeant Irby, he was a black kid from Brooklyn, New York, and he was within our unit.
Mm-hmm.
And they were always ran the rear of the convoy. That was their job, make sure there was no stragglers. But these two guys were like brothers, but they'd be calling each other names. It's almost like they just walked out of a race war.
Yeah.
But they loved each other. They depended on each other.
Yeah, and that's another thing that builds that bond that's deeper than blood. A lot of times people come back closer to the guys that they served with overseas than they are with their own families. I found that to be true with me in some aspects, and I've seen it in a lot of other people as well. So as a transportation guy, and you were running convoys and stuff like that, what was the daily routine like? And I kind of want to compare it to the way we ran convoys. We usually send out route clearance people before the convoys would leave out. Looking for mines and IEDs and stuff like that. Was that the same tactics back then? Did they have like route clearance?
We had route clearance, but it wasn't as high tech as you guys had it today.
Right.
Basically, you would have a map in the operations room, and then we'd report in the morning and find out what we were going to be hauling back and forth between Benoit, Tansanut, and Ambloc. And it's usually, a map with red pins and blue pins. And then we would get a briefing about where friendlies were and what was going on as far as the route that we're taking. And then they would brief us on what was happening when we got to our destination, what we're going to be picking up and bringing back. And it was verbal. Now, we were in Vietnamization. We were basically underneath the control of the Vietnamese. We were teaching them how to run logistics and operations with all the equipment that we're dumping in their laps.
Mm-hmm.
So the Air Force basically worked for the Vietnamese. The Marine Corps worked for themselves, but still had to work logistics for the Vietnamese. So Motor T, Marine Corps Motor T, they worked with us as Air Force Transportation because we had to get together as a small cadre of people. When I was at Benoit with the Marine Corps, total number of Americans at the base was not much more than maybe about 175 people.
Oh, wow.
That was it.
Yeah. That means that's daily missions then, because there's just not a whole lot of people to cover the ground, I would imagine then.
No, we lost track of a lot of people because, you might have a first lieutenant from the Air Force say, all right, you've got to haul this today. This is your paperwork. These are your logistics. These are the codes for your radio calls. And then we'd hop in our vehicles. But then the lieutenant would have to report our operations to 7th Air Force Base headquarters. And then 7th Air Force Base headquarters would have to report to the South Vietnamese to let them know that we're coming through. And a lot of times nobody knew where we were.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that is a tremendous difference from today. I mean, now the same things that you basically had to memorize, where the enemy was, where your nearest friendlies were, is carried with the soldiers now in Blue Force Tracker, and it's all updated in live time. Somebody ahead finds an IED, they can mark it right there on the map, and as you come to it, you'll see where somebody marked there's an IED there, where there was some talks, troops under contact, and you have all of that information right there as you're driving down the road in live time. So yeah, that was a tremendous difference then, because my memory is no good. So 10 minutes after we left out the gate, I'd probably forgot half that stuff anyways. But
we didn't even have computers. I mean, if you wanted to make a phone call back to the States, we usually have to go to a Mars station. And
I
then,
remember Mars.
Yeah. And then sometimes you couldn't even get a call back to the States.
Yep.
I mean, we didn't have email, computers, nothing like that.
Right. Yeah. You guys waited on mail call to come through, and some of these troops, it would take months for the mail to catch up to them because they were moving in so many different places. So yeah, I can imagine how tough it was. So let me ask this: did you find that since this was kind of more like similar to our end of war with Iraq, that we were doing the same thing? We were working with the Iraqis and teaching them logistics, giving them training on the equipment that we were selling them, leaving them, whatever that was. And we kind of noticed that the war at that point kind of became a lull. There was still some fighting. There was still some mortars and rockets and stuff, but it wasn't like before.
Are you ready to experience the power of military community right from the comfort of your living room? Introducing Military United podcast streams, now available on the Roku channel. Get ready to dive into a world of incredible stories, inspiring discussions, and the best entertainment the military community has to offer. With our veteran podcast host, you'll gain insights into the experiences that have shaped our heroes. And that's not all. We've got a lineup of talented veteran musicians playing rock, country, and more. Get ready to rock out with these incredible artists who have served our country and are now ready to entertain you with their soulful tunes. But wait, there's more. We've also got veteran comedians who will have you in stitches with their hilarious and relatable stories. Laughter is the best medicine, and these brave men and women know how to deliver it. So gather your loved ones, grab some popcorn, and prepare for an unforgettable journey into the world of military podcast, music, and comedy. With Military United podcast streams now on Roku, you can access all this incredible content with just a few clicks of a button. Military United podcast streams on Roku channel. It's time to honor, entertain, and celebrate the incredible men and women who have served our country. Join us today and experience the power of the military community like never before.
They knew at this point we were pulling out. They were just determining how many people we were going to leave on an embassy, and everything else was going to be handed over. And it seemed like the fighting kind of really slowed down at that point. The difference is they weren't fighting for more land compared to your war. So at that point where the negotiations was happening, did the war pick up for you guys?
Yeah,
I imagine that's what would happen.
It actually did. When I tell people about the Easter Offensive of 1972, even a lot of the Vietnam veterans, they knew nothing about it.
Right.
In 1972, they launched a major invasion, which was a three-pronged attack coming across the northern border of the DMZ, out of Laos and Cambodia in the Central Highlands, and then through Tainan Province in 3 Corps down south. And it was a major invasion with, they decided to use conventional wisdom as far as fighting a war. They knew most of the combat troops in Vietnam were yanked out. I think the last unit, combat patrol, was the 196th Light Infantry Brigade.
Mm-hmm.
And the only people left were support people like Air Force and then base security for Marine Corps at Ben Hoa and Da Nang. And there weren't that many Americans left in Vietnam. By the time we left Vietnam, or while the Eastern Offensive was going on, there were not much more than between 6,000 to 7,000 Americans on the ground in Vietnam from the DMZ to the Mekong Delta.
Wow.
And they launched a major invasion with tanks, artillery, infantry. It was so bad. Even we almost lost the USS Oklahoma and the USS Higbee because they were raked over by North Vietnamese MiGs because they couldn't get air support there in time to help them out.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I don't even know why we would have done that. You know, they should have, the peace should have been drawn before we started pulling troops out. I mean, because it just seems obvious that that's what's going to happen when you're fighting over land. You know, you're going to try to get every piece of it that you can before that line gets drew.
Well, you know, it's funny you should mention that because part of the peace negotiations with Kissinger and Le Duc Tho in Paris was that the United States would withdraw combat troops, but would leave advisors and maybe some support people behind. But the North Vietnamese would be allowed to keep all the territory that they have invaded and captured in South Vietnam.
Yeah.
That just didn't make any sense.
No, none. Especially so you know, before we sign, we're going to pull all of our people out, give you the opportunity to overrun and steal as much more property as you can, and then we're going to sign and say, okay, you get to keep everything. That's kind of disgraceful to the troops that were left behind to fight for this, you know, to hold these lines.
Yeah, you know, thank God for the Marines because, you know, most of us Air Force, we're trained up to a point of base security, perimeter, augmentees.
Yeah.
But because we were stationed with the Marine Corps, they really took care of us. You know, they taught us a lot of tricks, things that we didn't know what to do, especially when we were at An Loc.
Yeah.
So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, historically, I'm an Army guy. I served all my career in the Army, but you know, I'm not gonna downgrade the Marines because if you have somebody in a hard fighting situation, the Marines is where you want to be close to. They're a different breed. They really are.
Oh yeah.
And so, yeah, that what you just said makes perfect sense. The Army is good up to an extent, but we're more offense than defense. And the Marine Corps is able to hold lines and take over towns, whatever you need them to do. They just don't have the manpower to move forward and take over land.
Right. What's interesting is when we were at An Loc, I got to talk to the Marine that was with us, and you know, he knew that we were trained only as far as like base security,
right?
And he started explaining stuff to us that I really didn't understand. And then it finally dawned on me, you know, everybody in the Marine Corps, including the pilots, transportation, even administrative, their MOS, their primary MOS is an infantry rifleman.
Yep. The and that is one aspect that the Army is in one aspect. You know, our primary MOS is whatever. You know, I was a mechanic, but everybody is infantry first. So anybody can be grabbed and thrown in an infantry position. The difference is we don't train our guys to do that stuff. You get basic training and that is it. And the Marines, it's completely different. You know, they expect you to know your day job, but they expect you to stay tactically and technically proficient as well. And the Army, I guess, because of size, they kind of forget about us. And I think that's one reason a lot of people don't know this either. In the war on terrorism as a whole, it wasn't infantry that was the leading in casualties. It was the support MOSs that had the most casualties out of everybody. And the reason why is because they started using us as securities for gun trucks and convoys and stuff like that to reduce the size of the convoys. But we were, at that point, when they find that out, you're getting 2 or 3 months of training before you leave. And then you're put in that situation. And we just didn't have the skill set.
Yeah. Which brings up another problem that we had in Vietnam, because Nixon was pulling so many people out so quickly. We still have replacements coming in because of Vietnamization, because you still had to send people back into Vietnam to teach the Vietnamese how to use the equipment, how to distribute the equipment, how to operate the equipment, and use it tactically. But we didn't have a lot of old timers left.
Right.
We had people, when I got to Vietnam, the only person that had some experience in Vietnam was my supervisor. He was a buck sergeant. And he still wasn't very well versed in what was going on, because we had a lieutenant who had only been in country, I'd say maybe about 2 months. And there was just no experience to back up any of the decisions that were being made.
Yeah. Did you guys see a lot of, how were the citizens of Vietnam? Did they fight against you guys as well? So that was one thing that we ran into a lot, was a lot of our fighting. You didn't really know if it was the enemy or if it was a farmer just protecting his crops.
Yeah, we ran into that quite a bit. Matter of fact, there's a couple of times where some of the GIs, especially we had the first Cav, a small unit at Benoit, and they thought I was a Chu Hoi, which means a North Vietnamese who came over to the American side. But the South Vietnamese people, though, they were very worried. They knew what was going on. They knew once the Americans left, and they knew that leaving the North Vietnamese in the areas where they had captured during the Easter Offensive wasn't a good thing.
Right.
And they were very, very ambiguous towards me. It's not that they hated me, but they were just, I guess, kind of envious that I wore an American uniform, that I was able to go home back to the United States, and we were going to be leaving them behind.
Right.
The South Vietnamese people, they've been at war. I mean, people forget, or if they don't know history, I mean, the Vietnamese people was our ally during World War II.
Yeah.
Ho Chi Minh's hero was Abraham Lincoln, and he fought with the United States against the Japanese in French Indochina. So the Vietnamese people, they knew what was going on. They knew the politics behind that, but they knew when the United States was going to be pulling out that they were in dire straits. And so the Vietnamese people, they were friendly towards me, but yet you could see the animosity in their eyes.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, you look what they've just endured for all these years. I mean, because the war was very brutal. And if I'm not mistaken, did the war started out as a civil war, right? So there was even families that was split up where they would send one to the north and one to the south, so that, their theory was that they would have at least one child survive.
Yeah. Basically, what happened is that after World War II, the United Nations, they decided to give Vietnam its sovereignty. But France wanted to reclaim Vietnam as their colony again. Go figure.
Yeah.
So they invaded South Vietnam. And so Ho Chi Minh came to the United States and asked at that time President Truman, if they will support them fighting against the French. Well, politically, the United States couldn't go against our ally, which was France.
Yeah.
And so France, they sent their troops to Vietnam to try to reclaim the colony. Well, in order to fight the French, Ho Chi Minh started a government underneath the communist regime in the north, and the French started a democratic government in the south. After Dien Bien Phu and the French left Vietnam, the democratic government in the south decided to ask the United States for help, and the United States quickly jumped in because they talked about this thing called the domino theory. They didn't want communism to spread to the south.
Right.
And that's when we started to throw in advisors into Vietnam. And it just steadily progressed from there into full-scale war.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense why China jumped in as well, because they didn't want the communist side to fall either. So
no, they didn't. But see, it bit China in the rear end at the end of the Vietnam War too.
Yeah.
Because China invaded Vietnam in the late 1970s because they were also looking for territory. So if you take a look, politics make strange bedfellows.
Yeah.
Who's our ally now in the South China Sea? Vietnam.
Yeah. Yeah. You are right, man. And now I kind of see some of the animosity back in the States too. Why so many people were not for this war, because it seemed like it was all designed by politics. The whole war, even the splitting of the country was done politically. Partially because we couldn't help, and partially because, they knew if they did, they could get help on the other side. And so at no time, it doesn't sound like that the North really at that time was planning on taking over. It sounds more like we did what we did as a precautionary purpose.
It was, I don't know the behind the scenes with the politics, things that were going on in Washington, D.C. I mean, growing up here in the States, by the time I got to Vietnam, I already seen a lot of my friends go to Vietnam and killed.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Because I thought the war would be over by the time I got out of grade school. I thought the war would be over by the time I got out of high school.
Yeah.
I thought the war was over when I came home. And then I turned on the TV one day and the war was still going on. And then the fall of Saigon.
Wow.
I used to remember people coming back from Vietnam in 1965 when I was in grade school.
Yeah. I didn't realize, I guess so. I didn't realize how long, now that you say it like that, how long the war really went on. So I can imagine, that's one aspect that was the same with us. When we first went to Afghanistan, everybody was trying to go, partially because we didn't expect it to last very long. Look what happened in Desert Storm. 100 hours later, the war was over. And so that's kind of what we pictured. 20 years later.
Yeah. Well, with Desert Storm, it was kind of different because if you look at how Desert Storm was fought and the logistics, which was totally different from Iraqi freedom.
Yeah.
President Bush said, all right, the military, the Pentagon, you make the decisions. I'm not going to micromanage the war. You do whatever you have to do to make this as quick as possible, as brutal as possible, and just get it over with. Iraq and Afghanistan, we got into this whole thing of nation building.
Yeah.
And that was disastrous.
Yeah, and that's probably, one of the reasons why they use the primary focus of the special operations community for the first part of that war, but that's the smallest community in our military. You know, you've got the special ops command that is kind of taking charge and moving through the country, but the infantry really wasn't cut loose. We supported in elements at the beginning, and I think that was one of our faults, because you couldn't effectively close the borders that you needed to close. We still allowed passage back and forth through Syria and Pakistan. So I think that's one problem that we had with our planning. Um, and like you said, yeah, it was about trying to build. I mean, hell, we were even there teaching them before to fight against the Russians. You know, we taught them how to shoot down helicopters.
Oh yeah, it was, we were the ones that supplied Afghanistan with Stinger missiles.
Yeah, yeah,
Forget about that.
yeah.
It's because it was a proxy war between Russia and the United States through Afghanistan.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you are absolutely right. There's a lot of people don't realize there's a lot of historical blood that's been shed in that country. I mean, all the way back to Alexander the Great.
Oh, yeah. People need to look at history. Even with French Indochina, things that were going on during World War II and pre-World War II. Yeah. So even with the way Japan looked at French Indochina, because people forget that World War II wasn't what changed everything, that brought everything else up to where we are today. It was actually World War I when Woodrow Wilson was president at the Treaty of Versailles, that changed everything. Because if you take a look at how the boundaries are drawn in Southeast Asia, Asia Minor, and even in Europe, it goes all the way back to World War I.
Yeah. You were right, and to be honest, those were the last wars that our country's really been behind, was World War I and World War II. Every war after that, there's been a lot of controversy, and so
yeah. Vietnam, there's a lot of controversy. I think, I saw all these people protesting the Vietnam War as I was growing up. I actually lived in Chicago when they had the '68 Democratic Convention.
Wow.
I was still in high school.
Yeah.
And it didn't really bother me. I just thought, I'll never see Vietnam, because everybody thought, well, Nixon's president, he's going to be pulling troops out, so the war's over with. Even a lot of the guys who came back from Vietnam in the late '60s, early '70s, it's over with. But people didn't realize that Nixon was still sending people over there because of Vietnamization. It was real interesting how when I came home, that a lot of people would always ask me when I was when I tell them how I was in Vietnam, and they would ask me, like, how did I get to the United States? Did I take a boat? Am I a refugee?
Oh, wow.
And I'd say, no, I'm a Vietnam veteran. And then they say, well, where were you born? I said, I was born on the south side of Chicago. They says, well, where did your parents live before that? I said, South Bend, Indiana. On my father's side of the family, I mean, we're coolies. We built railroad camps, mining camps. I think I did some genealogy because I used to be active with my church, but we go all the way back, I think, to the early 1800s in mining camps in Nevada, Montana, California.
Yeah.
So we were coolies.
People forget, America is the mutt of the world. I mean, we are a huge melting pot of all sorts of different originations. The Irish that migrated here, the Chinese that migrated here, even us from European descent, and now, people would be eye-opened if they actually went and did their genealogy. I don't think anybody would ever come back 100% American, because it just doesn't exist.
Oh yeah, it's funny you should mention that, the genealogy. Before we got on the air, I was just watching a news blurb about this host on The View, Sunny Hostin. She just found out that her family was slave owners.
Wow. Yeah.
So, I had a good friend who worked at the VA. He is as Caucasian looking as you, but you would never know that his mother is African American.
Yeah. My wife is half Korean and half a whole bunch of stuff, and she's got a little bit of African American in her too.
Yep.
It was married into the family not too far down from her. Like a great grandma type descent. So it does not surprise me. I believe most of my family was Irish, where they came from. The name, there's probably some Scottish, because the names that are married into the family is a more Scottish name. So all of that stuff is descent as well. And I always joke with everybody. I said, well, I must have been, historically, I must have been a slave, because that's all I do is slave now. So.
You know what? There are times where I get mail and people, my middle initial is O. My middle name is Otto, Otto.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I would get mail and people would put David O apostrophe Chung. And I said, no, I am not Irish. O is my middle initial.
That is funny.
Yeah. My wife, she's an Iraqi veteran. She found out through her genealogy that she's a very, very distant relative of Rob Roy.
Okay.
So that's where she gets the fighting spirit.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. She was, it was amazing. People forget that, Iraq and Afghanistan, she was in the Coast Guard. She was port security. She was in a reserve unit, and they activated her. She was an M60 machine gunner. Tiny little girl.
Yeah.
And she saw a lot over there. She was the only female in her particular unit.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that don't know nothing about the Coast Guard. I had a Coast Guard veteran on several months ago, and since then, me and him have became really good friends. And he taught me that I didn't know that the Coast Guard was actually in World War II.
Oh yeah.
On the Alaskan side, there was areas that that they crossed into the U.S. and got into channels, and the Coast Guard was fighting.
Do you know who dropped the people off on D-Day on June 6th? It was the Coast Guard.
Was it really? I
Yes.
just always assumed it was Marines or Navy.
Yeah, the Coast Guard. They landed the people on Guadalcanal, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, Peleliu. In Vietnam, Operation Market Time. Before the Brown Water Navy got its act together, the only people patrolling the coastal waterways in the Mekong Delta was the U.S. Coast Guard. So it's called Operation Market Time.
Wow, I did not know that.
Yeah, Coast Guard. We lost a Coast Guard rescue pilot. He was transitioning over to the Air Force to teach Air Force pilots how to navigate and use tactics in jungle warfare to rescue down pilots. And one of the first people killed in Vietnam in action was a Coast Guard rescue pilot.
Wow, I did not know that. It's fascinating too, because how long the Coast Guard's been around and how little people know about them. And I think it just shows that all of us have that same spirit in us.
Yeah.
I watched these documentaries from that day, from D-Day, and when you see the faces of these guys, and now being years ahead, knowing what's coming the moment they get off of those, I'm not even sure what they're called, whatever it was that brought them up onto the beach. It makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up because they look so young.
Oh yeah.
And it's just so disturbing that we literally felt the need that we had to send them up against that. There was no other ways that we could have mitigated.
A lot of people don't know about Douglas Munro. He received the Medal of Honor. He was Coast Guard for saving a lot of Marines on the beach at Guadalcanal. He used himself and his boat as a shield to pick up wounded Marines on the beach, and he kept on going back and forth. And his name is Douglas Munro, and he was Coast Guard. Coast Guard. They've been matter of fact, the first U-boat sank in the Atlantic was from a Coast Guard cutter.
Wow. Now, as a matter of fact, I believe that's what he was telling me too, that would come up into those canals was U-boats.
Mm-hmm.
And he was, the reason why he knew is because he served on that area in Alaska. That's where he was stationed at as a Coast Guard veteran.
Mm-hmm.
He had a name for that place. He said it's desolate,
In Alaska?
Yeah. It's like
well, there's Dutch Harbor, Attu, Kiska. It's all part of the Aleutian chain.
Yeah, I thought he said like there was like a bunch of radiation or something in that area.
Kodiak?
It might have been Kodiak. Yeah, that might have been it.
I had a friend who was in the Air Force, and he found out that he was going to be stationed at Kodiak. He said, "Hey, bus me all the way down to E1. I'm not going. You don't want to be on Kodiak Island in the middle of winter."
Yeah. He said it was brutal. He said nobody wanted to be there, but there was a lot of history there.
There's a lot of history. People forget that the Japanese invaded the Aleutian Islands.
Yeah.
Yep. People forget that the Japanese submarines used to bombard Long Beach, California during World War II.
Yeah. Yeah, and unfortunately, I think in today's world, I don't think it's so much as forgetting. I don't think anybody's ever been taught,
No.
And I think that's so important about what the podcasting community is doing with us right now. Once things get on the internet, it's there. It's impossible to ever get it completely gone as it's being spread around. But the cool part about that is people can stumble on these videos and hear from the people on the ground that was there about their experiences, and they can get the documentary of how the war really was, regardless of what the books teach 30 years from now. They can get real live stories about what happened, because even back then, I think the press was so, there were so many things that was, you can't say this, you're not going to tell them this, and they wanted the morale to always show that we were doing great over there and we were winning, but that wasn't the reality.
No, the reality, well, my reality as far as being a Vietnam vet and being an American Asian, I don't like calling myself an Asian American, because I'm an American.
Right.
But the reality is that the media, I've had problems with the media myself. Even when I was working for the VA, the media, they were not your friend.
Right.
I remember when I brought the Vietnam Women's Memorial to Washington, D.C., I had a reporter walk up to me, and she said that Diane Carlson Evans, who is the founder of the Vietnam Women's Memorial, had directed her to me that I may have more information for her. And the first words out of her mouth when she realized I was an Asian-looking guy, she said, "So you're the one that brought this statue to Washington, D.C.?" And I said, "Yes, I am." She goes, "Why would you do that after all the things this country did to your people?" And I said, "What are you talking about?"
Wow. What did they do to Chicago?
I don't know. Chicago, it's a very liberal Democratic city. Like I told you earlier when we talked, when I got back to Chicago, the first person to call me a gook after I got back from Vietnam was a war protester.
That is so ironic. That goes down to so many layers of stupid.
But you just got to live with it, and you use it to your advantage.
Right.
right? That's how I was able to survive at the VA. I'm not a highly educated person. Most of the people I worked with at the VA, they went to Yale, Harvard, the academies.
Mm-hmm.
I just happened to be in the right place at the right time where they needed my skills. And I used a lot of my street smarts in order to get some of the policies and some of the budgets passed to take care of everything that was going on at the VA. We were trying to take care of minority veterans. And I opened up a lot of people's eyes as to, you better do your homework. A classic example, I remember when we went to Detroit to see if the minority veterans population there was being underserved. Mm-hmm. And then we found out that, the Caucasians were being underserved because the majority of the people that the VA was seeing were African Americans, blacks. And we found out, and I said, it's all about facts. It's all about numbers. It's not about feelings. You take a look here. These are the veterans in this community here that are white. These are veterans in this community that are African American. The African American community using the VA here in Detroit is huge compared to the Caucasian community. So who's the minority here?
No, you are 100% right. And I honestly think you might even find that same statistic in Georgia. Just because it is a very large African American community, at least in the areas where I was at, and so that's not surprising to me, because people don't do their own homework. That is a statistic that they could have easily found out, but instead they were probably being told, overall, this is what we're doing and we need to fix it. And they went to the other side of the extreme.
Yeah. There's a lot of people on the Hill that would go to the other side of the extremes. There was really no middle ground when you're trying to get something good, something done that was positive.
Yeah.
I was very, very upset. One day we were trying to push the trades and the crafts in junior colleges for disabled veterans program for all these guys coming back from Iraq. And there's this disdain on the Hill for blue collar workers. And I don't know where it's coming from. Yeah. But, I was told one time we had this apprenticeship program. It was between the VA and working with Ingalls Shipbuilding, Lockheed Martin, for a welder's apprenticeship program. And we got a lot of pushback. Says, well, shouldn't they have a 4-year degree before they learn a craft or a skill? And I couldn't understand that philosophy there. Why would you need a 4-year degree in liberal arts in order to learn how to be a hull inspector, an underwater welder?
Yeah. We've got that same issue where I'm at now in the civilian world. And they've just recently fixed it. We have had people that did not have a GED that they would not hire because for maintenance. So I'm a general supervisor for maintenance for a mining company. And their policy was you had to have a high school degree. And we were hurting so bad that we had people that was working for us as contractors being paid much higher wages, doing maintenance, and wanted to work for Doe Run or for the company because they did not have a high school diploma. One of them had been a contractor for 27 years. And they finally changed it to where now they'll take experience in the profession and have you take a test. And if you pass both and meet the requirements, they'll hire you. And it's helped out a lot of people. I think that was a very smart idea to do. And I'd been fighting for that for a while. And sometimes people forget that, you got to take background into this. A lot of people that their dads were mechanics, maybe they didn't want to be a mechanic, but they were going to learn some of that stuff as they were growing up as well.
You need to have a skill. I'm finding out that throughout my years of working with people in the VA, the most successful college students are people who have already learned a trade or a skill before they went to college.
Yeah. Yep. Oh, I completely agree. And I do believe that you need to have both. You do need to have some college as well. I do, but I don't have a degree. But I don't believe necessarily that you have to have a college degree, because if they brought the manufacturing back to America, that blue collar work would become way more important.
It would. Um, I'm a classic example of that when it comes to merit and hard work and not having a degree. I come from a family that they were just totally brainwashed that in order to start at the top, you need that college degree in anything.
Yeah.
And I was a rebel. I mean, I'm no angel.
Right.
Growing up in Chicago, I roamed the streets. But when I got back from Vietnam and I started with FedEx, I mean, there were not that many of us. I mean, I remember our first night of operations, we only had about, 80 packages?
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah.
But I have never been interviewed for positions that I've been placed into, because it's always been a situation where, all right, we have this manager, he's being promoted or he's left the company or he's stepping down. So can you just slide into his position and run his operations until we find somebody that we need to interview, because they're looking for somebody who had a college degree, because that's a position. It's management.
Yep.
I was just a ramp agent. And then they would, after 3 or 4 months, I would go up to my boss and say, hey, listen, I'm getting kind of burned out here. I'm running a ramp operations here as a ramp agent, and then now I'm doing the job as a ramp supervisor. And then they said, well, we can't find anybody, so we're just going to keep you here.
Have you ever wondered how you can help out the show? Well, that is very simple. You can help us out by going to www.twodrunkdudesinAgunroom.com. That is www.twodrunkdudesinAgunroom.com. There's many ways you can help us by listening to the show, supporting the show, liking, sharing, and everything else that comes along with social media. But one of our biggest goals is to help build the nonprofit Heroes Voice Media Foundation. This is a foundation that has decided to start celebrating courage and amplifying heroes. Find your voice with Heroes Voice Media Foundation.
And it was the same way at the VA. I was just on a committee for the Center for Minority Veterans at the Secretary's office. And then they said, hey, we need you to come back as a contractor just temporarily, because we can't find anybody, because no one wants the position, or we can't find anybody who's qualified. So would you mind stepping in here just temporarily? And then when I retired from FedEx, they asked me if I could come on board permanently. I don't have a BS, I don't have an MS, and I don't have a PhD.
Yeah.
My buddy, he calls it BS, MS, PhD, bullshit, more shit, piled higher and deeper.
Yep, that is absolutely correct. That's going to have to be a reel. That'll have to be cut out and become a reel.
Oh yeah, but merit. We're losing. Throughout my book, I talk about hard work. I talk about you got to move forward. You may have your down days, but you have to work.
Yeah, no,
you're not willing to work. You're not going to go any place. You're not going to go up or down if you're not willing to work.
Yep, you're right. And I think that was another part of my career that you've seen before the wars started. So I came in '94, and as they were downsizing, they found that there was a lot of people that just wanted to be stagnant. I'm good where I'm at. I don't want to do any more. I don't want to do any less. And that's when they started putting in, well, you can only be an E4 for so long. If you don't make E5, you got to get out, and so forth and so forth. And I think that was one of the reasons. They were looking for ways to downsize anyways, and there was just a lot of people that they didn't want more responsibility, and they were content where they were at. And it doesn't create for a positive environment.
No.
You need to have those drivers that want more. They want to be higher. They want to do more. I had a lieutenant colonel that had a great philosophy, and I use this to this day. He said that his sole motivation for getting promoted was because there was people that outranked him that deserved to be fired. And that is so true.
It is so true. And that's because, we don't have too many people who are being taught at an early age about merit.
Yeah.
Right? Hard work and merit and experience that you need throughout your life in order to move forward. And because of that, I don't think the general public realizes that our military is smaller than it was pre-World War II. And a lot of people don't realize, for every one person that serves in the military, millions of Americans don't have to, because you need the military underneath our Constitution to support and protect this country.
Yeah.
If you take, we crunch numbers at the VA. If you take all of the living veterans, active military, National Guard, and Reserve, we're less than 1.5% of the population.
Oh, I completely believe that. Yeah.
All right. And we talk amongst ourselves if things go south and we really have to fight for basic freedoms. Is the other 98% of the population going to stand behind us, or are we going to be left out to dry?
100% left out to dry. I completely believe this. I mean, as soon as look, all these TikToks that you've seen where people were walking out and changing their flag from the American flag to the black flag and everything else, but they lived in suburbia, I 100% feel like people that are out there doing these types of things are the ones that as soon as the electricity gets cut and the grocery stores are no longer filled, they are instantly going to go into survival mode. And it'll be more focused on robbing from the people around them to get their food and sources like that than fighting an enemy that's coming in.
Yeah, a lot of people aren't prepared just for everyday life.
Yeah.
I was born in 1950. Actually, I was born the same day the Korean War started.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the same day, the same time, the same year. Go figure. Also, my birthday's the same day that Custer had his last stand. June 25th.
You were born to fight.
Yeah. And throughout my years of growing up in Chicago and then going into the military and then working at the VA, I've done a lot of traveling in my lifetime. And I've ran into people, and I shit you not, I've run into people who don't even know how to light a match. I'm serious.
No, I get it. Yeah. Yep. And it makes you wonder how they even get dressed in the mornings.
Yeah. You'd be surprised how many, I work with the high school here, and, there's a lot of kids who don't know how to tie shoelaces.
Wow.
Yeah. So, it's what are we teaching our kids in school?
That is another place where people are stagnant. The teachers are doing just what they have to do because they're tired of the way they're being treated.
Right.
And that's understandable, but it's the kids and our next generations and our future leaders that are paying that price. It's funny that you talked about you mentioned the Korean War, because I have something that a friend of mine who never served, he worked for me. He started doing some home remodeling, and in the wall of a house that they were demoing, he found this. I've got it framed, and I'm going to try to show it to you. I don't know if you can see it.
Yes, I can.
That he found that it was, I did some research on it. It was, that's kind of the version of the AFIS POG that they used in the Korean War. That was the money that they gave the soldiers over there to utilize I'm sure they had something similar like that in Vietnam too.
We call it APCs.
Yep. And so when he sent that to me, I didn't even know about it. I didn't even think about, the other wars. Did they use AV's pogs? I didn't know until he sent that to me, and I did some research on it. And I find it so fascinating that somewhere in a wall of a house was this historical document,
Oh yeah, yeah. Korea. See, that's another forgotten war. It was a police action,
Right.
so it wasn't a declared war.
Right.
And I think a lot of people didn't really understand the Korean War because of the politics behind that war.
Right.
So it's kind of interesting when you see all the wars the United States have been involved in, and all the, I hate to say this, but all the money that's being made hand over fist by anyone who gets involved with the war. The military industrial complex, private contracting, the military industrial complex, all of that. It's, if you really follow the trail, it's all about money.
It is. Yep. It's kickbacks and contracts,
Yeah.
You've seen it big time in these last 20 years, between KBR and all these other companies, Dynacore and all of them. They made bakillions of dollars.
Oh, sure.
Off that war.
And then you have, the military industrial complex itself with, General Dynamics, Ingalls Shipbuilding, Lockheed, Boeing,
Yep.
Northrop,
Raytheon.
Yeah, Raytheon, big one, which is part of Beechcraft.
Yep.
And, but, it's just, I don't know when it's going to end, because I'll be honest with you, I'm tired of seeing war. And I'll be super honest with you, is that if I had kids, I will not let them join the military now, the way I see it.
I completely agree with you. I did not want my kids to join. and the one thing that pissed me off the most about the way we left Afghanistan was, as the war went on and we got tired, I heard myself say it, and I heard a lot of other people say it. I did 68 months over there. Well, 9 of it was in Bosnia. The rest of it was Iraq and Afghanistan. And the one thing I always said was, as long as we finish this to where our kids and our grandkids don't have to come back to this shithole. And that didn't happen. We will be back over there before my kids have grandkids.
It was the same way with Vietnam. Like I said earlier, I thought the war would be over by the time I got out of grade school.
Yeah.
High school and college. And, with this thing going on with Afghanistan, well, now the war that's going on now with Israel and Hamas, who knows when we're going to get out of that mess?
Man, that worries me too, because Iran is not a country that I want to see us fight against. I really don't, because that will be a long war, and it's going to be a completely different war.
It's going to be a different war, because if you take a look at the way our culture is going here in America, those people in Iran, they are determined people.
Yes.
All right. They're willing to take this as long and as far out as they need to take it and drain American resources.
Yep.
Now, does America have the wherewithal to go in, do their job, get out, and then let them solve their own problems?
Nope. That will never happen.
Yeah,
and because it's now all about, how do I get reelected? If I just walk away from this, if we level this and make it a glass beach, and I walk away, how do I get reelected? And there is no way that happens.
Yeah, and it's again, we go back to the bureaucracy, because Washington D.C., those people, they need to get out more. They just don't really have a clue of real boots on the ground issues with not only the American people, but with the way the world perceives the United States as a country.
Yep. You are 100% right.
In my book, there's one thing that I talk about where we're losing our sense of soul in the United States. When you talk to young kids today, when they think that the word romance is racist, we've got a problem here.
Yeah.
You know, when you have to shut up and not say a word for fear of being sued or fired because you don't know somebody's pronoun.
Yep.
You don't know what to say anymore, and then you stay quiet.
Yep.
When you have a quiet society, then you have control over the masses.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I heard a girl that was a North Korean, who fell into working, or not working, but met up with a lady that was helping people escape North Korea. She gave her to some people at the border. They took her to China, and they were human traffickers. She then got put into slavery in China. And when she was just talking about North Korea, that's exactly what they have, is a society of people that are afraid to say anything. It is a life prison sentence if they walk into your house and you don't have pictures on the wall of the leader. If you're not polishing it, or if the frame's broke or anything, you're disgracing your leader. And man, to think of people that can just walk in and to look at what's on your wall, you literally have no freedoms. Everything is gone at that point.
Yeah, and we're getting to a point in our country now where we're forgetting. I'm sure you heard this old phrase. Most of us veterans know it. For those who have fought for it, freedom has a flavor the protected will never know.
Yeah, yeah,
That's disappearing.
it is. Nope, you are 100% right, and it may even have something to do with why so many veterans say that they would go back to fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan um, anytime. And even though how bad things were, we come back here and things are so confusing and messed up that life was much more simpler when you were just fighting for your life.
It's the same way my wife Donna, she says the same thing. Her situation was even worse because she was a reserve unit and she got activated.
Yeah.
And she said, I was always wondering what happened to the Vietnam vets when they came home, because when I came home, it was as though like I deployed back from Iraq, and 24 hours later, I had to act as though nothing ever happened. I was back at my job doing the same thing I was doing before I deployed to Iraq.
Yep.
And so nobody knew what was going on. Everybody was having a drink, partying, and no one asked her, like, what happened?
Right.
Where have you been? And she had to assimilate herself and pick up immediately the minute she stepped off the plane. There was no decompression.
Yeah.
There was nothing.
Yeah. I said the same thing. The pace for the war that we were in was going around so fast that when you lost people, you didn't even have time to mourn. I was in the special ops community for 10 years of this, and every 3 months you were deploying. You went to Iraq for 3 months, you came back to the States for 3 months, you went to Afghanistan for 3 months, you came back to the States for 3 months. So anytime something that happened, and then you had all the training events and everything that was still happening in the States that you had to support, it was like there was no time to digress anything that was really going on.
And that was done, I think that was done on purpose, because if you take a look at the logistics of leadership, because of what they did as far as how they deployed the troops to Iraq and Afghanistan, it burned out the boots on the ground leadership.
Yep.
Burned them out to the point where there was no wick left.
Yeah. That's where I was at. I'm not going to lie. I remember asking when the war first kicked off, I asked our regimental commander, when is it our turn? When do we get our chance? And he literally said words I ended up living, was watch what you wish for, because you just might get it. And by the time I had got close to retirement, I was saying, when is it somebody else's turn? I am tired. I'm tired of the deployments. I'm tired of the death. I'm tired of the funerals. I'm tired of it all,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And at that point, things were getting very political. You know, it
Very
wasn't war no more. Now it was,
But that's what happened in Vietnam too, because the American people were getting tired of it. Because the war was. I mean, General Creighton Abrams and Westmoreland. Oh well, the war's going to be over by this day, this time, this year, and it wasn't.
Yeah.
And then the draft was going on, and it was just very similar to Afghanistan and Iraq, only the technology was different, but the culture was still the same with the media and how the country felt about the war.
Yeah.
So I saw the war from a different point of view, though, because when you look like the people you're trained to fight, you see it from a different angle here.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
I remember when we first got to Vietnam, you have to go to these classes because we are now guests in these people's country.
Guess that we're about to tear this place up.
Oh, yeah, kill them all. Let God sort them out.
Yep.
But when I got back home, I was not to mention, I had my own personal problems, but the war, it changed my whole attitude about why we were there in Vietnam in the first place. The only good thing I could think of as far as my time in Vietnam was the camaraderie. And like you said earlier, how simple it was to know that the person next to you is going to watch your back, no matter what type of personality they had.
Yep. And that's where the bonds get tightened, that is something that people who don't serve will never understand. Never in their life will they ever be able to comprehend, because they quit even knowing who their neighbors are. They don't even know their neighbors' names anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that closeness they will never feel. And that's why I always say, a lot of this bond goes deeper than blood, because you fought side by side.
Yeah.
And I think trauma brings that closeness.
Right. And then I really feel sorry for you guys because I don't think people realize that the information and the education that you are supposed to be receiving when you get deployed back home or being discharged about what your benefits are is up to snuff. Working at the VA, I could not believe how many veterans didn't realize what benefits they had.
I still don't know all of them. I'm not going to lie to you. I really don't.
How many people don't realize if you're a disabled veteran, you have a $250,000 small business loan if you want to start a business. People don't understand congressional receipt. People don't understand how a rating works, what a nexus is.
Yeah.
How to find a good rating officer or a good service officer to present your case. And it's just we just don't have people that are willing to do that. We already have veterans that want to do it. I mean, I do it through the Purple Heart, but you can get burned out because there's so many veterans. How many millions of veterans would you say since 9/11 have passed through and been discharged from active military?
I would say 8 million.
8 million?
Yep.
Okay, that's a lot. Okay, you figure I would say only about less than a fourth of them have even the slightest knowledge of how to go about transitioning through the VA back into civilian life.
Yes, I would agree with that. That is the biggest topic that I get talked about on my show when I have veterans is why is so many veterans killing themselves? And I tell them the most dangerous time is the transition period. When I got out of the Army, I was planning suicide. I was trying to put some insurances together to take care of my family, but I did not want to live no more. I didn't like the person I was looking at. I didn't like the person I had became. And I did not go straight to the VA. I was one of those guys. I got into a piston contest with the VA rep, and I didn't file a VA claim for 3 years until after I got out. And
Yeah, a
you
lot
know,
of see now, and there's a lot of veterans out there that also they need to learn how to play the game as well.
Yeah.
We had this one veteran in Washington, D.C. The guy was almost homeless. He was an amputee. But his attitude was like, well, I don't need anything from the VA because there are veterans out there who need it more than I do.
Yep.
And I said, wait a minute, you're almost homeless. You're an amputee. Nobody owes you anything. You earned it.
Yeah.
You're doing something that 99% of this nation can't even think of doing.
Yep. Yep. I agree 100%. And people don't understand that while you're in, you're somebody. You have an identity because the military gave it to you, right? People relied on you for things. You had responsibilities. You were in leadership positions. All of this stuff was your persona. This is who you were. And when you transition out, all the tools they gave you did not apply to the civilian world. They helped you in the world that you were in. Your identity was stripped from you, and you went straight from being somebody and having a purpose to being a nobody and shoved at the bottom of the barrel and having to work your way all the way back up again in a society that you don't even understand the rules anymore.
And that goes right back to what we were talking about, where this college degree thing, yes, you do need a college degree in certain fields.
Yes.
But here you have a guy who's an electronic specialist on a B-52 working with radar, microwaves. He knows how to put all the stuff together to make sure that the plane flies properly. But if he wants to get his A&E after he gets out of the military, he's got to start all the way at the beginning again.
Yep.
Which I think is wrong.
It is wrong, and that's one of the reasons why I started this nonprofit that I'm building, is not for the PTSD and the people that are struggling as much as people that have put their dreams on hold to serve our country. And then after their service are now trying to pursue their dreams, as in being a musician or whatever it is, an author, and that's what our nonprofit's doing is helping them use media as therapy to tell their stories and pursue the careers that they want to pursue. Because it's tough.
And one thing that we're not talking about as far as pursuing a career and trying to get their lives together, that's why I got involved with the Vietnam Women's Memorial Foundation. When I met Diane Carlson Evans, people forget about the women who serve in the military. I mean, it's more prominent now, but people still kind of like forget about that.
Oh no, they still have forgot. I have had this. I didn't even think about. And I probably even was one of the people that I did it with and didn't even know it because I didn't think about it. But you see these women. I've heard stories of women that got chased down by people because they parked in a veteran parking spot, and they got yelled at because they said, just because your husband is in the military does not mean that you get to park in a veteran parking spot. People sitting in the VA waiting room for the hospital, females, and somebody leaning over going, oh, is your husband in the military too? Are you here with your husband? They completely even don't even think about that. They could be talking about the veteran.
Oh, sure. And people are so uneducated. I mean, something funny happened to me years ago. I was talking to this group of people, and I said, well, I'm married to a veteran. And this lady looks at me. She says, so you're gay? And I went, excuse me?
Wow.
Get it together. I mean, well, just you need a colonoscopy so you can find out where your head's at.
No kidding. Oh man. Well, why don't we dig into your book a little bit? So you come back from Vietnam, and I'm probably 90% positive that when you came back, you had no idea that you was going to eventually write a book. And so you come back, you're working for FedEx. Where did the book idea come from? When did you decide I need to tell this story?
I decided to write my story because I was going through a lot of emotional and personal problems.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be honest, I've been married. This is my third wife. I lost a son, and I had no idea it was because of Agent Orange, because I was ignorant at the time after coming back to Vietnam.
Yeah.
And then I got married for the wrong reasons to a nurse who served in Vietnam. And then my father and my wife, my second wife, passed away within 1 week of each other.
Wow.
And it was right before the 25th anniversary of the Vietnam Women's Memorial. I was actually I was a board of directors for the Vietnam Women's Memorial Foundation. And I was asked to go back, and Diane Carlson Evans, who is the founder, we're very, very, very good friends. And she was concerned about me because we're very close. And she knew I was going through some hard times. And she said to me after I was ready to leave the National Mall, I just want to know, because I'm noticing something you've changed. Are you happy? And I didn't even have to think about my answer. It just came out, and I just looked at her straight in the face and said, no, I am not happy. I mean, no. You know, take my life, you'd be doing a favor.
Yep.
And
where I was.
That's when I decided that if I did do something crazy, I need to write down my story about what it was like growing up in Chicago as an American Asian going to Vietnam, and then what I had to go through after I came back from Vietnam. I couldn't have written the book after I got back from Vietnam, but I figured it was the right time to put everything together as a memoir just within this last 3 or 4 years, because you can plan for the future, but you can't predict it. When I got back from Vietnam, I had no idea that I would be the one to bring the Vietnam Women's Memorial to Washington, D.C., which was the very, very first national memorial to women in service ever in this country.
That is awesome.
Yeah, and I'm sure you've seen the statue of the nurses.
Yep.
And I had no idea that I would be working for a company that would change the way America does business with FedEx.
Yeah.
You know, and what saved my life was that we had no idea that all these people that Fred Smith was bringing on board were all Vietnam veterans, but we were too busy to ask questions. All we wanted to do is work.
Yeah.
And I had no idea that I would become a veterans activist and end up working not just for the VA, but for the secretary of VA at the VA central office in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
And I couldn't have put a book together right when I got back from Vietnam. I had to go through a succession of experiences before I could actually put a book together.
Right.
But it was hard because I figured, like, how am I going to put this book together? And in the process of doing that, I found out that a lot of people that I wanted to get in touch with to get my information about the book had passed away. My good friend Danny Gummels, who is in the book, we went through a lot at An Loc. We were at the siege of An Loc. We lost a lot of people. People didn't even know, Vietnam veterans themselves knew about the 1972 Easter Offensive. And that was another reason why I thought to myself, people need to know what happened at the end of the war on the ground. You know, I had this, I was giving a speech one time, and I told this group of people, you know, a lot of Vietnam veterans are upset because of what Jane Fonda did. I'm sure you've heard that story.
Yep.
But you need to talk to the veterans that she did it too. And that's my group of people that were left on the ground in Vietnam in 1972 when she came there and told us that we had to surrender in the middle of a giant offensive, a huge offensive. Well, what are we going to do? You know? So a lot of people don't know what happened on the ground because I mean, there were divisions of North Vietnamese that could have overran Ben Hoa and Lac.
Yeah.
Because there weren't that many Americans left there. But by the grace of God, for whatever reason being, they didn't. But just the fact that we were there when all that was going on, that's where I learned the true meaning that there were no atheists in a foxhole.
You are absolutely right.
You could be terrified, but you start praying to whoever you believe your creator is.
Yep.
And that's something that a lot of people never experience. And I knew I had to write about that.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. So let me ask you, when all this was going on and people, the country was, or the war was getting downsized, I'm sure that means the media had left as well. It kind of seems like when the war gets to that point, they lose interest. And you guys are waiting to go back home. And all of this is going on. The morale around had to feel like, man, we just got left. The war is not over. They're coming. They could be here any minute, and we're going to be forced to defend this. And our government and our country left us here, handicapped. I could see that being the morale of the troops. And then, like you said, you got people telling you that you have to surrender.
Yeah, it was. I think the hard part, though, I mean, that was bad enough. But coming home in the late 70s and the early 80s, the media had nothing to talk about. So they decided to take it one step further. If you take a look at all the TV shows and the movies that came out in the late 70s and early 80s, when they depicted a Vietnam veteran, he was the bad guy. He was the bank robber. He was the drug addict. He was the dope dealer. He was the wife beater. He was the cop killer.
Yep. I never thought about that, but you are right.
Yeah. We were the bad guys. Even, I have problems with even the movies that sometimes come out today about Vietnam. I think there's only two movies that I know are pretty much, they're Hollywood, but it pretty much hits the point about how people felt during my time in Vietnam. Back 21 with Danny Glover and Gene Hackman. That happened while I was there in Vietnam. And then the second movie with Mel Gibson called We Were Soldiers, Once and Young, because Joe Galloway, who's a good friend of mine, he just passed away. He's the one that wrote the book.
Oh, wow.
He was there, and he sat on my committees while I was at the VA, and he would talk about what happened at the Ai Drang Valley. Mm-hmm. But a lot of the other movies were, they just really didn't depict Vietnam veteran as human.
Right.
So that was a bad flavor in my mouth when I got back from Vietnam. I remember Jan Scruggs, who was the founder of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, when he told us a story about when he was coming back home. This lady sitting next to him saw his dog tags, and she asked to be seated somewhere else because she thought that he was a baby killer.
Oh my God. That is unreal, and some of this I never even thought of, and it goes way deeper than I even thought, but the one question that does get asked on our show is, why so many Vietnam veterans don't want to talk about what happened. But as a whole, it seems like our generation is more open to talking about things. And I told them, I said, well, the biggest reason I think is we came back to a country that at least supported us. They came back to a country that hated them. I said, would you want to open up about your story if you were being spit on?
Well, and you hit a really, really good point here, because in my case, I saw what it was like on both sides. Like I said, people thought, oh, you're a Vietnam veteran. When did you immigrate here? Yeah. And then you had The only people that I could trust was the veterans community. I could not trust anybody in the civilian community because they just didn't understand. I had this one girl one time in the 1980s. She said, "So you went over there to kill your own people?"
Oh my God. You know, I would love to know the statistic of the amount of people that protested the war, right? But never actually dodged the draft, meaning they never got drafted. They were either not old enough or whatever for whatever reason.
They were in
Because
limbo.
huh?
They were in limbo.
Yeah. I would like to know the percentage of them that actually was being illegal at the time. Because it seems to me that you get all these protesters that are willing to judge you for going when a country says you will either go or you're going to go to jail versus people that can say, how did you do that? You should have never done that. You should just dodge draft. But they didn't have to make those same choices. They're still enjoying a freedom.
Mhm.
And they, you know, after they're done with the protest, they get to go home. They're not going to go to jail for dodging that draft. You know, they didn't have to leave the country and hide out in Canada because the country was forcing them to go fight a war. So I don't understand the protesters because most of the time their hypocrisy is crazy. You know, they want other people to do what they're not willing to do themselves. And that's really what it comes down to.
Right. It's this. It's a different form of wokeness. It really is.
Yeah.
Do as I say, believe as I believe.
Yep.
But if you have anything that's different, you're wrong.
Yep.
If you experience something that I didn't experience, you don't know what you're talking about.
Yep.
That's why, all of us who served in the military, people forget it's a totally different culture,
It is.
right? We have to rely on each other. The military is put in place underneath the rules and the laws of our Constitution to protect and defend this country and the Constitution.
Right.
People don't understand that the military is put in place not to practice democracy as a republic. We're there to defend it. And that means we're there to defend the people who fall underneath it.
Yep.
And people can't grasp that.
Well, you know, they also forget that this country was built on a war. This country would not be what it was today if it wasn't for a group of people that fought to get separation from England.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and a country that is born that way, it shouldn't be surprising that it ends up fighting the rest of its life. You know, we are, as a country, we're not afraid to go to war. I mean, you look at the Civil War, you look at the World Wars, you look at the American Indian Wars. I mean, all these we fought our whole life.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. The United States was a country that has founded its freedoms through war.
Yep.
Now, yeah, we have our problems, and may have been some corruption on the way. But in the long run, if you add up everything that's going on with this country, I mean, we're still the best country on the face of this planet.
Correct. I agree.
And this is home. See, people forget, oh, I don't like this country. Well, then you don't like home.
Yeah.
Because if you say you don't like this country, that means that you don't want to live here anymore. You don't like where you're living. And where you're living is home. Your country is your home.
Yep. And they also, you know, that same thing that they don't like about this country and all the fighting also gave them the freedom to move to wherever they want.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I had a soldier on here that his whole mission is to teach veterans how to live abroad. He does not live in the States. And I didn't know this either, but there's several VA hospitals throughout the world that are not just in America,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and what he was talking about wasn't for me. You know, I don't know that I would be happy living in another country, but it might be for some people. And those same people that don't like America, we gave them that right. They don't have to live here.
And they don't realize that.
Yeah.
It's funny you should mention that, because working for the VA, sometimes I was a little naive about the VA. When I started working for the VA, how many people realize that the National Cemetery Administration within the VA, I mean, we take care of the cemetery in the Philippines, in Belgium, England. We have VA facilities in Germany,
Yep.
Puerto Rico, the Philippines again, Japan.
Yep.
We're the United States is just everywhere. But wherever you go, the United States has an embassy. And that embassy represents you as a citizen that you can always run to that embassy if someone's trying to take away your freedom.
Yeah.
No other country has that.
Yep. No, I completely agree. And like you said before, we have our problems, but you know what? Every country does. I don't care what country you go to. There's going to be problems in that country, no matter what kind of government they run. No country is amazing 100% of the time. Energy just doesn't work that way. You have to have negative to have positive. You can't have happiness without sadness.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have a balance. So that perfect world does not exist. There's going to be problems.
No, it doesn't. Once that, I'm afraid we're going to be going down a rabbit hole with our society, because when we get to the point of having no remorse,
Yes,
it's over. It's done. Because now
we're not far from that.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about this. Let me ask you this. Everybody in the world has a cell phone. Even probably some homeless people have cell phones, right?
Illegal immigrants
have cell phones, right? And they come across a person that just got hit by a car. The first thing that happens is everybody pulls out their phone and they hit record instead of 911.
I've noticed that.
So to say that we are not far from not having any remorse, I think we're right there.
Mm-hmm. I think the one group of people that has remorse are veterans and active military.
Because we still deeply care about this country and its community. I mean, look, the nonprofit world is filled full of veterans. And all of them, all those people that are part of nonprofit will tell you, even some non-veterans that are part of it, giving back and helping is a form of therapy in its own. You will feel better about yourself. It will give you purpose again. And you will see that there is still some good out there, and there's still a chance. There's still some hope that this country can still be great again.
Yes. And maybe people will learn the word romance, and falling in love is not about control or being racist.
Yeah.
That really surprised me when I talk to young people that they don't know the definition of falling in love or romance.
Yeah.
Because that's a very important part of life.
Yes, it is. There's multiple things about humans in general. I mean, one, we were not designed to be independent. We're tribal people. With that same said, we were not designed to live in the millions like we have in the big cities. And that is why in my opinion, there's such a huge difference between the personality of somebody that comes from a big city compared to somebody that comes from a town of 800 people. Operation Encore is a 501c nonprofit that is helping veterans turn into rock stars every single day. You can learn more about what Operation Encore is doing by going over to their website at www.operationencore.org. That is www.operationencore.org.
If you can give them a hand, just click that little donate button or follow all of their social medias and learn exactly what they are doing to change the lives of our veterans.
You know, we're tribal people, and we have to have each other to feed off of and help and have full happiness. But when you put that big city together, you get people that just don't care about people as much.
No, you don't. Although sometimes you do get something that backfires. We were down in Missoula the other day, and this one lady pulls up to the restaurant window, and she had California tags. I didn't think anything of it, but they finished her dinner before we did, and she walked up to me and she goes, "We're new here in Montana, and we just want to know if you're okay." I said, "What do you mean, okay?" She says, "Well, we're new in Montana. We've always heard that the people out here, they treat minorities horribly, that they're victimized. Are you a victim?" And I was taken off guard, and she said, "We noticed that you're not white." And I said, "What?" So, their mentality from coming from a large city. But my wife, she's great. She looks at the lady and says, "If you keep this up, you're going to be a victim." So,
Yeah. My question would have been the same thing to them. Oh, I heard in California they treat minorities bad. Are you a victim? I seen that. I noticed you were white, because there is no way that white people are the majority in California.
Oh gosh, yeah. I always tell Montana, amazingly, it's per capita now. It's the largest veterans community and the fastest growing veterans community of all 50 states.
I could see that as well. When I only went through Montana a couple times as a truck driver, and I almost died. Me and my dog almost died not too far from the Wyoming Montana border.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I picked up a load of I drove flatbed, and I picked up a load of roofing material, and to go back down and come back I-80 was 200 more miles than going up through a pass up to what is that, I-90 that runs through there. Going up to I-90, it was only 60 miles from where I was to I-90, and then I could take I-90 across. Well, what I didn't know is that pass is also closed during the wintertime, and we were right there at that border. It had rained the night before, so I delayed leaving just a little bit to let the sun come out and melt the roads. And as you climb up and you get up to where there's clouds, you know you're up there.
Mm-hmm.
And that truck, man, I was 79,000 pounds, and I got to the point of no return where I couldn't turn around anymore. And that windy road climbing this mountain, there was one time that I started sliding backwards, and brakes are locked up, and I'm just on ice. There's nothing I can do about it. And I'm trying to guide the trailer to go back around the mountain versus off the side of this probably 200-foot drop off. And I made it just barely. I guess it caught some grass or something, but I hit the sign, the big curve signs that tells you, hey, there's a big curve here. The back of the trailer hit one of those as I was getting the trailer back under control. But
a few years ago, there was this major pileup in that area. Something like 45, 50 vehicles started piling into each other as it was downgrade.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a pretty bad scene. But a lot of tractor trailers just couldn't stop.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And so I got to the top, right? And this is how nice people in that area are. I was taking the chains back off my tire. I was pretty sure from GPS that I was at the top. Finally, this is 6 hours into this trip now, by the way. And I'm taking the chains off, and a guy stopped And he goes, "Oh, I see you're taking the chains off." He thought I was chaining up. And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Y'all from around here?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "I just want to make sure." I said, "Am I at the top?" He said, he said, "Yeah, you." He said, "It's all downhill from here." He said, "You need to be real careful, though." He said, "This late in the year," he said, "we got a storm that's coming in." He said, "They come in quick."
Hmm.
He said, "Luckily for you, that the downhill side of this mountain is on the sunny side." And
Yeah.
that's something else I didn't know about climbing it, that the sun didn't get there until the evening time. So, but he did stop to see if I was okay and everything else, and I'm gonna tell you from experience, you don't see that everywhere you go.
We live in a small town on Flathead Lake. It's called Polson. It's in Lake County. And I would never go back to Chicago and live,
Yeah.
ever.
Yep.
It's the people are nice. The people are friendly. Everybody is really, really family oriented,
Yep.
and everybody cares about each other within the community. And that's something that I don't want to give up. I don't want to give up. Plus, the veterans here. We have a lot of veterans that we're helping out here. We actually had a big win. We had this one veteran, a female veteran, and we got her 100% and back pay going all the way back to the 1990s.
That's awesome.
But
I love hearing stories like that.
Yeah, but you just need to know how to play the game, and you need to know how to find the right service officer, someone that knows what they're doing. What's their score? How many cases have they won? And you need to know a veteran service officer that can represent you all the way up to and through the Veterans Court of Appeals.
Yep.
Because if they don't know how to do that, then they really don't know how to play the game that well.
Yep, I agree. My uncle served 16 years, I think it was 17 years in the Air Force, and he's 60 some years old now, and he just recently got to 100%. He did it himself for a while, for a long period of time,
Mm-hmm.
and he finally ended up hiring an attorney, and I have no idea who it was, but he hired an attorney that helped him get the rest of the way. And this last year, he finally made it to 100%.
How much of a percentage did that attorney take from his compensation?
I'm sure it was a big chunk, probably at least 30 to 40%. I'd say closer to 40, probably.
See, there's a lot of different things that we had to go through at the VA. I mean, how many people don't realize that even the laws for policy when filing a claim are different? If you go to a VA representative to file a claim, they will file your claim, but they don't get to it until they get to it.
Yep.
If you have a congressionally chartered organization with a service officer file your claim, the law specifically says that because it's been filed through this particular agency, a congressionally chartered veteran service organization, the VA is required to get all pertinent information as quick as possible to close your claim out and satisfy the client as soon as possible. If you file yourself, they can just take their sweet time.
That's what happened to me. I'm at 70%, and I got to that point all by myself. I didn't go through anybody. And
there's a big I want to push the guy's podcast. His name, I forgot his name, but he does. It's called InfoTap, Veterans InfoTap. They're making some major changes. If you're at 70%, there's this one administrative thing that the VA is going to be changing that could possibly push you up to 100%. So you need to go check that out.
Yeah, I will. Absolutely. Because I am now in that, health wise, I'm getting to the point where I'm having a hard time work as in the maintenance field, between knees and back and stuff. And there was a lot of things, like my knees is one of those that they said was not service related, but I came in at the age of 19 and spent 20 years in, with 70-pound rucksacks on my back,
Mm-hmm.
walking in the desert over there in uneven terrain. You can't tell me that my knee damage isn't military related, you know? And I never had any surgeries, no nothing, you know? And so there's things that I'm going back now to relook at.
Yeah. You have to understand too that a lot of veterans don't know how to put the paperwork together.
Yeah.
So we've come up with this plan with our service officer here in Montana. It's a lot easier for a service officer when a veteran comes in and they've got their civilian medical records all organized by date, separated from the military, your 201s,
Mm-hmm.
all organized by date. That way, you've created a trail that they don't have to create a nexus for. See, a lot of people don't know how to play the game.
Yep. Yeah, you're 100% right. You know, there's a lot of stuff I got 0% on, but I still got rated for it because I didn't know how to play the game. I didn't know the keywords that had to be put down. I didn't know the regulations on how many episodes of headaches or whatever it is that you have to have a week to get rated at such and such. You know, I didn't know any of that stuff.
No, I don't think they even gave out enough information on the PACT Act.
Oh, I agree. I'm sure they didn't.
Yeah. And then, you know, like a lot of Marines, a lot of people who were like temporary duty assigned to Camp Lejeune,
Mm-hmm.
they never thought about that. You know, if you were at Camp Lejeune for just one day and drank the water there, you're underneath the PACT Act. You know, and then finally we got veterans for Agent Orange that were in the Blue Water Navy, Thailand, Korea, Guam.
Yeah.
All of that. You know, a lot of the Vietnam veterans I talk to, they agree with me is that, you know, we can't abandon the next generation of veterans.
That is one part I do feel sorry for on the VA because our war lasted for so long that they are dealing with drastically different generations.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my generation that fought the first half of that war versus the generation that finished that war that will retire 5-6 years from now. You're going to have to reach those people completely different than how you reached me.
Mm-hmm.
Therapy for me is not going to necessarily work for therapy for them, you know, because our country has changed so much and the thinking and the things that we were taught as kids are so drastically different. You know, I'm going to tell you, I seen it in the soldiers. I'm going to tell you a real quick funny story. And I know we're getting long, but I had a soldier that the company commander got in trouble, and his punishment was he had to interview all of his soldiers and report back to the battalion commander on what he learned. And I had this one soldier that did not want to be in the Army anymore. This is 2013-ish. And he gets called to go into this interview, and I go in with him, and he sits down, and the commander goes, "Private," he said, why were you coming in the military? What brought you to the military? And he didn't even hesitate. He said, "Call of Duty, sir." And the commander goes, "Well, I get that." He said, "Your family probably served and you felt that sense of urgency with the war and everything that's going on, and you wanted to do your part." And this kid had the dumbest look on his face I have ever seen. And he looked at me, and I looked at him, and I looked back at the commander. I said, "Sir, I think he's talking about the video game." And he goes, "Yeah, sir. I thought the Army was like the video game Call of Duty, but it's not. Can you chapter me?"
Oh,
You know, and I was like, "Oh, I gotta retire."
really, you know, like, yeah, it's almost like you want Article 15, the younger generation.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. I felt like a babysitter. You know, people ask me, "What are you going to do when you get out?" And I said, "I'm probably going to open up a daycare." It seems to be the only thing I'm qualified for anymore, you know? And it was so frustrating, man. It wasn't fun no more. And I didn't understand this generation. And I feel sorry for the VA that's going to have to reach them.
Well, my mission in life before I die is to continue to help veterans.
Yep.
And if I can't help them, at least give them support. there's not too many of us Vietnam veterans left as opposed to the numbers of us that were actually on the ground.
You're right.
I think of the 3.9 million of us that served on the ground in Vietnam, as of the last census, there's less than 700,000 of us left.
Wow. Yeah. And it's so important that you guys are documenting. I am so glad that you wrote your book, and I strongly suggest anybody else that is out there that served in that era, they need to start a blog, start a book, something, document their experiences, because once you're gone and there is no more Vietnam veterans, the stories that are told is what people are going to know.
There is a way that the younger veterans can still tell their stories, and it's kept perpetually at the Library of Congress. It's called the Veterans History Project.
I have not heard of this.
Yes, we started this back in the early 2000s. Get a hold of the Veterans History Project. It's online, and they'll send somebody out that's trained to film you and listen to your story, and then it's cataloged and documented as the Veterans History Project at the Library of Congress.
Wow. I am going to reach out to them.
Right. And there's plenty of other ways to tell your story. I wrote the book strictly because of I'm already in the Veterans History Project, but I needed to tell my personal story and all the idiosyncrasies of how I was raised.
Yeah.
As a very, very strict Asian mother and a very composed father. He was in the Marine Corps. And what it was like growing up as an Asian American in Chicago, and then ended up going to Vietnam and coming back, and the ramifications of that. And then finding out that in my lifetime that, I had no idea that I would be the one bringing the Vietnam Women's Memorial to Washington, D.C. I had that statue in my possession for almost 3 months on a whistle-stop tour before we finally got to Washington, D.C. and dedicated it in 1993 on Veterans Day.
That is awesome. I got to ask real quick. You said your dad was in the Marines. Was he in the Vietnam or the Korean War, or?
No, he was in World War II. He was an interpreter.
Really?
Yeah.
Man, that was such a fascinating
He was called a China Marine because that's when they had the Allied National Act, where Allied nations could join American forces if they were needed for a specific skill. And because my dad could speak different languages, the Marine Corps took him on board as an interpreter, intelligence.
Wow. That would be awesome. That would be a story to hear. That is for sure.
Yeah. He was a little upset when I joined the Air Force, though.
Sure
he used to tell me this joke. You probably heard it. They're like, if you tell each branch of the service to do something, they each do it differently. If you tell the Marines to secure a building, they destroy it. If you tell the Army to secure a building, they attack it. If you tell the Coast Guard to secure a building, they inspect it. If you tell the Air Force to secure a building, they lease with option to buy.
I have not heard that, but that is so true.
No matter what branch of service, though, when it comes to fighting with other branches of the service, everybody becomes one.
Yep. Look, at the end of the day, family is the service, and we're all brothers and sisters, and we're going to fight amongst ourselves. We're going to talk shit about each other. The Marines do it to the Army does it to the Navy and the Marines and the Air Force, and everybody does it to the Air Force, and the Coast Guard.
We got the Space Force.
Yeah. I tell people that the Air Force created the Space Force because they were tired of being picked on. But but again, in a time of war, the meaning of never leave a man behind goes to everybody. We would never leave anybody behind, regardless of what service you were in.
Exactly. Did you see that movie, The Last Full Measure?
I have not.
Okay, this is a movie that kind of went under the radar. It's about Airman First Class Pitsenbarger. He saved over 90 guys from the 1st Infantry Division out of Benoit Air Base in 1966. He received the Medal of Honor posthumously, but it's got an all-star cast. It's got Samuel L. Jackson, let's see, William Hurt, Christopher Plummer.
Wow.
And it came out 3 years ago, but it's a true story about an Air Force PJ who saved all these Army guys.
The PJs is another one of those special operation guys that people don't know a lot about, and man, they do a lot of amazing things.
They do. But all branches of the service, including the Coast Guard, they all have, their special operations.
Yep.
They all do.
Yep.
Actually, when you put everything together, those of us who served in this society to protect this nation, we are this society's special operations.
Yeah, you are right. And again, like I said, the things that you're doing and the small mom and pop nonprofit is the backbone of the veteran community right now. They truly are, because without those kind of organizations that really does care about the veteran and his benefits and everything else, his well-being, we would break.
Mm-hmm.
We would.
No doubt about it.
I don't talk bad about the VA. I go through the VA now, and the VA clinic that I see is amazing. I tell everybody that your experiences is no different than anything else. It's hit or miss. You may have went to that hospital that one day, and the person you were talking to just found out that their dog died or something, and they were having a bad day. Your one experience does not make that place horrible.
Exactly.
Sometimes if you see that place is just not for you, you have the right to go to any clinic.
Mm-hmm.
A
lot of veterans don't realize that. They think that once they're assigned to a regional office or a medical center, that's where they have to go. But you can go anywhere you want.
Yep.
The one thing that you need to stay on top of, though, if you move to a different state, you've got to transfer your records to that VA regional office.
Yes.
That's where. Yeah. Here's something, and then I'll let you go. There's so many rules at the VA. Because I was an employee at the VA for security reasons, because I'm a veteran, but I was employed at the VA. Mm-hmm. All veterans' records of employees who are veterans working at the VA, we don't realize that our records are shipped off to the Seattle regional office.
Really?
The country.
I wonder why that is.
It's for security reasons, because we were veterans, but we are getting VA benefits, or we're underneath VA care, but we work for the VA. So our particular records are sent to Seattle.
So that you guys can't do anything for yourself. You can't benefit yourself. Okay. That makes sense. Absolutely. Yeah.
But when you leave the VA, you've got to remember that you've got to go change that and have it transferred to the state you've just moved to, and you're retired, or you've left the employment of the VA.
Yep. Yeah. Mine changed when I went from Georgia to Missouri. It fell under a different area. I'm like, I guess I'm actually right there by the border of where it does change. Mm-hmm. But by my zip code, I had to do the same thing. I had to have everything transferred over.
How far away from St. Louis are you?
88 miles southwest.
So if you're ever at Jefferson Barracks, look up Daniel Gummels, Air Force.
Okay.
He's in my book. He was my mentor in Vietnam. We went through a lot. And he's buried there at Jefferson Barracks.
I will do that. I absolutely will do that. And I'm definitely going to get a copy of your book as well.
Yeah. If anything, what you'll get out of the book is that, well, this is me speaking personally. No matter if you're up or down, you got to work.
Yeah.
You have to work.
Yep. Well, let me bring you forward and tell everybody where they can find your book. I know I've had your website and this link right here to get them, but
you can purchase the book either through Amazon. It's called Face of the Enemy, An American Asians War in Vietnam and at Home. You could also go to booklocker.com and find the book and purchase it through BookLocker. You could also purchase it through Barnes and Noble. And it's a memoir that I put together about my experience as an American Asian growing up, going to Vietnam and coming back, and learning about myself and the country as the war progressed before I got to Vietnam and after I got back from Vietnam. It's on ebook, and I think it's going to be coming out on Kindle pretty soon. But it's I find it, as the writer of the book, very interesting to myself because it's something that, again, as we talked earlier, you can plan for the future, but you can't predict it. And you learn something more about yourself every day as life goes on.
absolutely. Dave, I'm telling you, I've had an amazing time. Ever since I was a kid, I've always been fascinated with the Vietnam War. I don't know where it came from. I never had any family members that I know of that served in the Vietnam War. My grandpa was in between the Korean War and the Vietnam War and got out, and my dad and everybody else after him came in after the Vietnam War. But I've always been fascinated with it, and I have nothing but respect for the Vietnam veterans that served. And so I appreciate you coming on and having this conversation with me. I absolutely loved it. If you don't mind, I'll put you back in the backstage and I'll throw the exit video out, and then I'll be with you, talk to you for a few more minutes. Does that sound okay?
Sure.
All right. Thanks again for coming on. All right. Like I said, man, there was a lot of information that came out in this episode, and the takes from it is as a veteran, you need to do a little bit of work yourself. Nobody's going to come knocking on your door and go line for line with you on your benefits. You've got to dig, you've got to ask, and you've got to be willing to put in the work. With that being said, some of the other topics that we hit, the differences between my war and the Vietnam War and everything that had happened was tremendous. The technology, for one, had changed, and the reason why people were there had changed, as well as the aspects of the population when we returned. All major differences, creating pros and cons throughout the war. I hope everybody enjoyed this episode. I know I did. I would love to have Doc back on again. And I hope all of you guys go to his website, purchase his book. I'm going to get me a copy. It'll be right up here on the shelf with the other people that have been on the show. And I hope you guys do the same. So be safe, take care, and remember, don't let the day kick your ass. Kick its ass. Y'all take care. See y'all next week. Be safe.